Blender 5.0 just added a new compositor preset update. So using my skeleton environment, I'm just going to use each node preset and apply it to this scene and show how we can utilize it and do a breakdown of all the environments. So let's get into the first node. We have all these presets right here we can use. So right now we go into chromatic aberration. We'll go to G, drop it in like this. And if you double click it, you can see all the nodes they set up. So it's a lot of work. So now chromatic aberration just adds a bit more like impact to your scene. So it has like that 80s kind of look to it. So if I either increase it all the way, you'll see that double color to it. And there's 3 options: offset, which is just, you know, different ways it plays with its scale we were just looking at. You go directional blur, you can change the direction of it. So you can move around and you can change how much samples you want of it. I like to go to lens dispersion. So if we go to factor, you can see it's going like that. And we click on fit, trying to make the character fit into the scene. And if you go all the way back here, which is where I like to go, maybe do like a bit more like that. And if you press M while your mouse is on here, it will cancel out the node. So it's really nice. And the next one we're going to use is a sensor noise. So this one just adds noise to your scene. For me personally, I wouldn't use it, but if you want to just add some grain, maybe you're doing like a game look to it, you can play around with the noise here. And we can go into the vignette, which is my favorite part. And let's press M to negate that value. For vignette, I think that's one of the most important parts for any scene. I usually been always making my own node, and it takes a little while for me, but the fact that it's here makes it awesome. And so the factor just kind of determines how much further in the shadows will be on the edge. And the vignette is just basically the edges being black. And feather determines how soft and hard it is. Transform lets you just like how circular it will be for the vignette. I will just leave it like that. And then, you know, scale, you can change how far in the vignette's gonna be. We only want the head to be shown, and then we can just bring in the scale. But that'll be it for the vignette. And if you're liking the vignette and all these cool nodes Blender has, I made a tutorial on the ray modifier for Blender 5.0. I also made a product lighting setup. So I made a couple setups you can use. They're all free to use. If you want to download, practice those, I definitely appreciate it. But let's go to the next node. So the sepia, which I don't even know what that word is, but if you go here, you can go to where it says applies a brown tint to mimic vintage photo tones. So literally what it's doing. So if I go red to like a yellowish brown, and then if I do saturation, I can make a gray, I can make it super deep. So if I were to go to red, it's really saturated. I don't know if I would use this too much, but it's always a nice option to have if I want to go for an old look. Now that's pretty self-explanatory. And then the split toning just plays highlights in the shadows. So I want to go for a yellow tone, and then the blue, I'm going to make it really bright. And then you can play the highlights, increase them all the way, and then balances out the colors, makes them even all the way. The tune image is also a really nice note. You go to the contrast, obviously you can increase the contrast of your scene, increase the color boost, and then the clarity, it's always nice. You can sharpen the textures, make a bit more sharp. If you go all the way of clarity, it'll be look like those memes are like the refry memes. And then detail, emphasize the texture. I think it's not too bad if it's all the way, but clarity could also go back. And sharpen does pretty much the same with both. If you go all the way forward, it just makes the texturing, and then the border is a little sharper, which is always nice. Really depends on what you want. And the preserve color will, you know, it'll do a little bit of color changes, depends on what you want. I would say I would just take it off for the blue. And then the other one I think is not as useful, let's press M on that, is the radius. It pretty much just sharpens the whole scene. If you want to go all the way, if you see how it happens, you know, it does what detail and sharpen does. So I wouldn't use this too much, but you can change the threshold. This determines how much will be in the scene. You know, it's an option. And then the one I was having trouble with, if we just end that out, this is for animating. So I don't have an animation, I don't have any keyframes in my scene, but I was looking into it. It plays with the contrast of the colors, so the contrast is just taking over control of the scene. So maybe you want to just have more control of the shadows and stuff, and maybe have only black and white. Maybe that's an option. But comment below if you know more about retime. But next, let's just combine everything together. I want chromatic aberration. Remember, you don't want to add too much. Let's do 0.8. And let's do lens dispersion. Let's try to fit it in. So it's always nice to have. Sensor noise, you know, if we put it right here, it creates some noise. I personally don't think I want that. And then the vignette. Vignette is always really important. You always want that in your scene. And then the sepia, which is the vintage node, we probably do not want to. So let's press M. Let's go to split toning. This one's nice. We want yellow. We want yellow for a scene, and we want blue. And let's increase the highlights for the yellow. Just increase the eyes in the crown part. That one's always nice to have. Let's go to the tune image. This is what will help boost our color. Let's boost the color a little bit. It'll make it darker because the highlights are there, maybe, or the shadows are there. So maybe you can reduce the shadows a little bit. Maybe reduce the yellow a little bit. It's a little bit too strong. Clarity. Let's move it up a little bit. That's nice. It brightens up the scene. Details. Adds more texture to the material. Sharpen. Make it just sharpen a little bit. Preserve color. Let's preserve color. Unsharp mask. We got this right here. If we were to change this and that, I personally don't want it, so we don't need it. But so far it looks good. But the next nodes I personally like to use is the glare node. Let's go to glare, drag it right here, and we want to make the eyes glow. And I usually just like using bloom. And then the next one I like to do is the RGB curve. These ones I really like to use the most, because right now we can change the colors of the scene. And the colors like that. And pretty much this is all we need for the scene I want. Press on your layer, you press Shift Control, and you press left click on the node you want. This is only one the viewer will look at, so this is the only node affecting it. So it's always nice to have, so you don't have to, you know, delete everything and everything. But if we want to go up to here, go to viewer, now we can Shift Control, then it'll affect the image. So it's always nice to have. And they'll be making even more presets as Blender 5.0, you know, development goes on. So check that out. And also my array modifier for the new one for 5.0 I made. So check that out because it's an awesome tool. And I hope everyone has a good one. And until next time.